Les, I've been looking forward to this.
Have you?
Yeah, well, you obviously haven't. I said to him a minute ago, so when we had our chat a few weeks ago, I was like, does he do lots of these? Is he looking forward to it? But I definitely am.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. I mean, it was hard to get a date in the diary, but I'm glad we've done it.
And you made it on a day with a tube strike. And so thank
Exactly,
you.
no problems.
Tell me in your own words, who is Les Ferdinand?
Who is Les Ferdinand? Oh, jeez. Outside of the footballer?
However you choose to say it. Imagine someone watching, listening, that actually doesn't know who you are.
If someone didn't know, if I was explaining myself to someone, I'm a former Premier League footballer. Spent 20 years playing professional football. And then ventured into being a sporting director.
It's very humble of you. Very humble of you. So you don't know this about me, but I don't support a team.
Oh, right, okay.
But I gravitated to that Newcastle team, which was just like cavalier. But I was, it was back, showing my age, back page of the newspaper to get the news and so on and read it. Even though I'd watched the game, it was amazing times, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great era. And it's really weird. I was speaking to, randomly this morning, I was speaking to Prince Nazim, right? He called me by mistake. And we started chatting and he said, the 90s, that era was, he said it was great for boxing, but it was great for football. Everything just seemed, I said, I think we lived in the best era there ever was. And he was like, no, 100% agree.
It's cool you got to play in it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The
Legacy.
Football, everything about it, it was the introduction of the Premier League and that coming in and that kind of like blew football into another stratosphere. It's gone into another one, an even bigger one now, but it kind of like blew football up and it became more mainstream.
What was it like being part of that? Because you were, well, you're old enough to look back on the whole kind of transition of there were pints after the game to then like proper diets in place and so on. You lived through all of that and the money just going.
Yeah, I was fortunate when the Premier League came in that, you saw a lot of former players who had been absolutely exceptional footballers who, went into running pubs, went into running nightclubs, went into owning shops, whatever it was, and, had to still work when they finished playing
the money
the game.
hadn't been in the game.
Yeah, the money wasn't in the game for those guys, and you've just seen it evolve over time. And fortunately, I caught a little bit of that.
Yeah. But in context of probably the chat we were having off camera, actually, they were golden times compared to what now is almost sort of entertainment. We were talking about Formula One and the kind of almost the drive to survive type element of it. We're both fans of the sport, but we can see there's entertainment maybe first before sport. Where do you sit with football right now?
Without wanting to sound too old, again, I was having this conversation the other day, and people say the game weren't like it used to be. Tackles, the referees being mic'd up and all the bits and pieces now. It is a little bit more razzmatazz than it is the actual blood and thunder of what football was. People rolling around and getting, free kicks for holding their faces when they've been kicked in their knee or their ankle and they're holding their faces as they go down. It's all changed. Years ago you'd get kicked and you wouldn't want to show the opposition that you were hurt, so you just jumped up. Now they're screaming before they even go down.
It's not good to watch.
It's very, very different to what.
Because you brought a lot of physicality to the game, right? You're a big guy, and you could use that. You're penalised for that now, surely.
Yeah,
in the current game.
Yeah, without a shadow of doubt. You say I brought physicality. It's because physicality was brought to me, and that was what the game was. Centre half, and I always tell people this story. I always remember as a player when they started to change the rules a little bit. I remember playing against Arsenal at Queen's Park Rangers, and there was always a ball that a midfield player would play into a centre forward that you thought, oh no, I'm going up in the air, and the ball be played into you. You had to go for it. A defender would come through the back of you, go up in the air. And then when they changed the rule with the tackle from behind, right, what the referees did straight away was like they would give the defenders one opportunity. Right, and they'd come over and they go, right. So I remember playing against Arsenal and Tony Adams goes through me on the halfway line, go up in the air and I fall down, don't complain, I just get up and the referee runs over and he says, Tony, that's your one, no more. Any more you're going to get booked. So he's like, oh, referee. And as he's running away, he's got the baldy, right, I've had my one, yours is next.
Pass it on.
And you knew another one was coming, do you know what I mean? But back then as a centre forward, he was able to give a little bit back as well. And you shook hands at the end of the game and everyone got on with it. very, very different now.
I can tell you actually you're pleased to be part of that era.
Yeah.
Did you really enjoy it? Because there's an element, and we can sort of link that to anyone at the pinnacle of sport, where you're fighting for your place, you're dealing with whatever's going on in the changing room, in the sort of the outside world. But did you really enjoy? Because it's so many people's dream, right? And it must have been your dream as a kid, and you realised it.
You know, it's really strange. As a kid, it wasn't my dream. I loved football, but I never thought I was going to be a footballer.
What did you think you were going to be?
I had no idea, but I didn't think, because there weren't many black faces that I saw playing football at the time, so that I could relate to say, right, okay, yeah, I want to do that. Normally you see people in a job and you go, yeah, I'd like to do that, but there wasn't many that I could relate to, so it wasn't an option that I thought was going to be there for me. I didn't think, as much as I love playing football, I never thought it was going to be an option to play.
As a saying, you can't be what you can't see, which brings us to role models as well, and also to the fact that when I met you for the first time and had a chat, there was a real element of frustration that black players coming through the game don't then get elevated into positions of authority and power. Is that still a trend, or is that changing?
I suppose I went into, I came out of football, went into to coaching, and I always remember when I was playing, I was talking about doing my coaching badges, and I remember a real prominent coach, had been a manager, was a coach, and was now on the other side. He was sort of like in the boardroom. I was having a chat with him, and he said to me, for people to take you seriously as a coach, you need to find a good non-league club where a chairman's got ambition, and that chairman's going to back you, and then people will see that you want to be a coach or a manager. And I said to him, I totally understand that, and I get that, to show a hunger and determination and start right at the bottom, but why do my peers not have to do that? And I mentioned some names of players that in the same era of me that had come out of the game, gone straight into managing in the Premier League. And you're saying to me that I've got to go to a non-league club. And I said to him,
that's prejudice, right?
And I said to him, why do I have to do that? And he said, no, I'm just saying, if you want people to take you seriously as a coach and know that you need to do all your coaching badges. And I said, no, I totally get it. I 100% get what you're saying. But why does no one else? Why are you not saying that to anyone else? Why are you saying that to me?
And what he said?
And he did turn around and he said, we need to look at how we think of things in the boardroom.
That's a cultural.
Yeah.
That's a traditional toxic. Has that changed? How long ago was that?
That was, so I was still playing. I've been retired 18 years now, so I would have been in my early 30s when he said that, and I'm now 58.
So where you're still super current and relevant and immersed in that world. Someone coming through now, seeking that same advice as a black player, aspirationally wanting to be a coach, that advice surely must have changed.
Well, if you look at the Premier League in terms of how many black managers or coaches are in there, there's none, because Nuno's just gone. I think the other day, so you got no black coaches. When I became sporting director of QPR for a period, Chris Ramsey came in as a black coach, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe Chris Hughton, I'm not sure, in 2014 was the only black coach in the Premier League at the time. You move on to 2025 and there's none.
There's a massive disconnect there, because you said, and this is quite an important point to make, when you were coming through as a player, there weren't many people that you could see. That changed. So that was, so it's sort of, I'm just trying to join the dots, looking in from the outside, why very clearly there have been phenomenal black players that have done so much for clubs, country. And so surely that must mean, I'll get myself into trouble now, there's a hierarchy of some kind of barrier to entry, and it's how you break that. I guess if you knew the answer, you don't, because as super relaxed as you are, your whole demeanor is relaxed. When you're on the pitch and when you are wanting something to happen, you go after it. I'm just curious as to why that's not changing.
Yeah, it's a question that's asked all the time, and people come to me and say, "What do we need to do?" And I'm saying, "Well, hang on a minute. It's like someone burgling my house, and the police can't turn up, and they're saying to me, "What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do now?" It's your job to find out. You're supposed to find out who burgled my house, not me. You're not asking me, "What do we do now?" Do you know what I mean? So it's but it's frustrating, because there's a load of players that have done their coaching badges and want to progress, but not being given the opportunity. You know, we keep talking about breaking down these barriers. We keep talking about, you know, like I've often said, well, for a long time now, so I'm not wearing any more badges, any more T-shirts. I'm not taking any more knees. I'm not doing any of that because it doesn't seem to, you know, it's the flavour of the month for a while, and then after, it's what comes after that. I keep saying what comes after that, you know, and that's where we are right
It's
now.
all very well talking about it like we are now. I mean, I'm already in that mode of like what needs to happen, but it's out of my. But I just for me, I can't understand. And racism in football, you've lived through a huge transition there. There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of things, initiatives brought in. What is the current state of it, in your opinion, right now?
I think in stadiums, unfortunately, over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit more than that, we've seen it start to rear its ugly head again. And if you looked, especially on social media, I think the numbers are increasing every year in terms of people being racially abused or sexually abused, whatever the you know, any type of abuse, people are being abused, and it's rising rather than
So the
being
stats
reduced.
are increasing.
Yeah, your stats are increasing, and I think it's easy. I mean, years ago, I mean, the first bit of racist mail I had, someone had to write a letter, put the name of the club on the letter, get a stamp, go out and post it. Right, it'd go quite a bit of trouble to do it. Now you can just sit in your room and go bang, 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 and
Did you get that? Did you get that sort of racist?
Oh yeah, I got letters through the post and stuff like that. You know, if I'd done particularly well against a team, scored a goal or whatever it was, then you know there was a chance that I would get racist abuse by the form of a letter or something in the post.
I mean, you and I are from an era where there's a sort of man up and get on with it and fend for yourself. But was there any safeguarding? Is that the right terminology? Or did you have anyone supporting you?
No.
Because if you think about the fact that there is a young lad there that's come through huge odds to be at the pinnacle of the sport, you can't help but have an ego at that point, right? You manage it really well. But the point is, you're out there wearing a shirt for the club and country that puts you in that spotlight. And then at what point do you have to manage not wanting to retaliate? Probably when you're out on the pitch, go back to me, you can hear what people are saying and so on. How did you manage that?
You do. You just you unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do. You can't jump into the stand and start having a fight with people. So
Cantona
did. Well, it was funny because I mentioned that in an interview I did. You know, it took for a talented Frenchman to jump into the crowd and kick people, kick someone, for us to realise we had a racism problem in this country. It took to that, and I said, can you imagine if a black player had done that? He'd never play football again.
It's a really good point.
Never play football again. You know, so.
And you know, the other thing was he got vilified for it, but actually I'll never know what was being said, but it snapped him, it broke him, right? And yet there's an element of going back to those proper glory days of you playing where it's almost like you were pieces of chess on a board and not humans. You know, for people to be able to say some of the things you must have heard people come out of their mouths and so on. There's an element of that. And how, yeah, again, almost the same sort of question, but just that resilience you've almost sort of built up. Are you at peace with all that?
I have to be, yeah. You know,
You seem, again, super relaxed.
You know, I was, you know, just thinking about back to that Cantona moment. People don't know this, and a lot of people won't realise this. I did the first ever racist campaign in this country with Cantona after he did it. We were both sponsored by Nike at the time, and Nike did the first racism campaign in this country. And me and him did it together. And that was, wow. I can't even remember when it was.
Makes you feel old.
Yeah,
well, I was. Feel really it makes me feel better. I was still at school when I was watching
when he did
it. When that happened.
Yeah, there you go. It was at Crystal Palace, wasn't it? Man United at Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
And we're still talking about it today.
There's a whole thing left unfinished there, and we won't solve it here. But thank you for sharing that. You mentioned those sort of thoughts of going into coaching, and ultimately it's led you to being president now. How much thought did you give after playing days? Because I often imagine what it must be like for you, where you walked out countless times to huge rapturous applause. You were also a scorer, right? You know, you're ultimately a forward, so you actually get that glory when you score a goal and get to celebrate. To then at some point knowing you're going to hang your boots up, but potentially miss the edge of it. I want to know about that transition from thoughts coming towards the end of a career and how you managed to sort of missing that dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, so, again, I was asked about this because, you know, the statistics that say that a footballer comes to the end of his career, 85% of footballers, marriages break down after they finish playing football.
85%.
85%. And I remember doing the interview, and the person asked me, "Why do you think that is?" And I said, "Well, all of a sudden, you've gone from a purpose in your life. You're getting up every morning and you're going into a training ground and blah blah blah, and you're out of the hair of your partner or your wife,
which can work for some people,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that those few hours of separation is great in some relationships. So all of a sudden you're under her feet all the time, and probably getting on her nerves a little bit because you're around the house and not doing what you're supposed to be doing or should be doing. And then all of a sudden, unless you've been very lucky and fortunate in terms of what you've earned, all of a sudden what you was able to do as a footballer, this is just my opinion, what you was able to do as a footballer, say if you need a new sofa, you know, with the wages that a footballer earns, you go and get it next week. You know, if you decide you want it today, you go get it tomorrow. And all of a sudden, when you're retired and the money's not coming in as frequently or as much as it was, then all of a sudden that sofa might take a couple of months to buy. So your whole lifestyle changes. And with that, the depression of not going into a training ground each and every day. I mean, I was really fortunate. I played till I was 39, and I was still being offered a contract. And I remember sort of like going into Adi Boofer, who was the manager at Watford at the time, and said to me, "Come in." And I thought, I'm going to come in, I'm going to de-train myself out of football. So I went in every day. And fair play to Adi, he incorporated me in the first team football. So I got myself to a level of fitness. And I think what he thought was once I got there, that would persuade me to play for another year. But I got to that point, and then they went away on pre-season tour to Finland or somewhere. Like, they said, "Do you want to come?" I said, "No, I'll stay and play with the 21s." And I stayed and I trained, and I trained with the 21s till they came back. And I always remember the first day of the season was like, you know, the first game they were playing away. And normally, you know, on a Friday, you get on a coach, wherever you're going to, you get on a coach and you get your seat and you go, right, okay, this is the start of the season. And I remember coming out of the training ground as the coach was going up the drive at Watford. And I thought to myself, I'm really glad I'm not on that. And I kind of realised I'd made the right decision to retire.
Because a lot of people must struggle with that lack of identity. So you were properly at peace with that.
I was at peace with it. I knew it was time, and you know, as much as I loved football, and if I could play today, I would still play, but the knees and everything else, my back was telling me that you've
your body.
Yeah, exactly. I had to listen to the body.
But from a mindset point of view, right? That's really good to hear that. So that you sort of you transitioned mentally. And peacefully, if you like, but what did you then spend your time doing? Because you had a purpose every week. You had a game to train for, which keeps you physically fit, keeps you mentally sharp. How did you transition that?
I was really fortunate because coming out of sort of like playing, I'd sort of like shaken hands with the BBC and said, look, I'd do some of the football focus and so on and so forth. And so a lot of my time on the weekends was still taken up watching games and commentating on games.
So you're still part of it, so still seeing people you know.
Yeah,
and all
so
that,
still, and when you go into that little room and you've got 3 or 4 former players doing the same thing, the banter's still the same, and so you're kind of like still involved with it without having the day-to-day involvement of going into a training ground. So that kind of like softened the blow a little bit and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go back into coaching. I didn't know whether I'd get a job as a manager. And then I started thinking, well, what's next? What's next for me? And fortunately for me, Harry Redknapp went back into Spurs and asked me to come in and coach. And so I went in, and when I got in there, I sort of like got a taste of it and thought, right, I'm going to do my coaching badges. And so I went through all the process, done my pro license, got everything I needed to be a manager, but I just didn't think I was going to get a job. And so I looked at other avenues, and the sporting director role was one, even though there was no black players or former black players in that role. I just felt that, the business side of it and sort of like being in the boardroom and seeing how it all functions, I thought that was the avenue I wanted to go down.
Because there's an element of personal satisfaction by doing that, but also that's a visible face that goes back to that whole, dare I say, you talked yourself out of a coaching job because of the fact that the advice you've been given, and which is something that's got to change. What is the role of your presidency?
Well, I was sporting director at QBR for 8.5 years, and then I sort of like stepped down from that about 2 years ago now. So I've gone back into doing a bit of media stuff just to keep me out of the
I was
house.
going to ask. So apart from playing some golf,
Yeah.
and you look again, super relaxed. Is it a transition time for you at the moment where you're just enjoying
it's
some
a
time out?
transition time. I'd like to go back in. I feel like I learnt a lot in my first role, and I still feel like I've got quite a lot to offer to football.
Yeah.
So if I get the right opportunity to go back and help somewhere, then I'd like to do that.
We touched on, I guess we call it mental health, stuff you've been through, the resilience you built, and I want to know kind of almost what you do and have done, what works for you to keep mentally fit, and is that tied into playing golf, getting steps in, and keeping physically fit?
Yeah, I go through phases where I feel like, right, I've got to get on it, and then I do shows like this and see that I'm putting a bit of a tummy on, and then I have to get back in the gym again. So yeah, that kind of like keeps me ticking over. You talk about the mental health side of things, and as you said, when I was playing, that was never talked about. And so when you saw players who drank heavily or gambled heavily, no one actually knew what was going on with them. And when I look back on it, these guys were going through mental health issues. If they weren't playing well, they didn't know how to deal with it, and there was no one there to try and help them. So they turned to things that numbed their time in football, and unfortunately, some of them went by the wayside because of it. But there was no help.
Right at the beginning of this journey with Extraordinary Stories, I interviewed Stephen Corker.
Okay.
You'll know what a talent and what a reflection from his point of view to have the maturity perspective to look back on all the addictive sort of things that sidelined his career. Did you swerve all of that? Did you have any? Because there's a tribal element to football, right? You're a band of brothers, spending a lot of time together. So often you can copy the people around you, right? So there are people that have got into drugs. I'm not specifically talking about football here, or drinking, or whatever, because the people around them do. But it feels like you managed to just keep out of all that.
I was really fortunate. I was never a big drinker, and I went to a massive drinking culture in Newcastle when I went there. It was part of the camaraderie, but it wasn't what I did. I wasn't a big drinker. I was fortunate. I'd had family members who were alcoholics, and I always looked at it and thought, that's not where I want to be. That's not who I want to be. And so I stayed away from that. Steve, you mentioned Stephen Corker, Coach Stephen Corker, and then when I went to QPR, he was one of the players.
Of course.
I had some really good conversations with Stephen.
He's a good lad.
He's a great lad, and it's great to see that he's got his life in order now, and he's going in the right direction, and he's not afraid to talk about what he'd been through and stuff like that. So
goes back to that role model side of things. Do you see yourself as a role model?
I keep getting pitched as a role model.
I see you as a role model,
especially when I went into the role I went into, and it was interesting because a journalist asked me, do I feel like I need to be successful to help the next cohort of black players looking at perhaps going into the sporting director role? Do I feel like I need to be successful? I said, why has every other sporting director been successful? And what's your definition of being successful? Because you don't know what my role is at QBR. You don't know what they've asked me to do, but you're saying I need to be successful to help the next one come through. I said there's loads of Caucasian directors of football that move from job to job to job, not because they've been successful at all of them.
It seems like there's an extra layer of pressure and expectation.
Yeah, and that's what we got to get away from.
Yeah, it's really invaluable to share that. My next question for you was and is, what is your definition personally, as Les Ferdinand sitting here now, of success?
I mean, for me, when I went into QPR, it was when I spoke to the owners, it was about trimming the wage bill. I went into a wage bill that was around about 78 million. By the time I left, we had it reduced to 15, and trying to stay competitive in the championship was hard, but we managed to do it. At the same time, we needed to sell players, and we did that. When I went in, in the 8 years I was there, I spent 30 million. With the sale of Eze, that's just gone as well. Has given them a bit more money. We made over 70. So for me, that's successful. I mean, the ideal for me would have been QPR getting promoted back to the Premier League.
But that's not actually within your control.
Yeah, we was unfortunately way off of that in terms of being able to do that. When we was trending in the top 6, we were punching well above our weights because we had like the 15th worst budget in the league. But You know, as supporters, that supporters don't understand that because they've seen this side be successful. They've seen this side in the Premier League, and that's where they want to see him again. But they don't understand what it takes to get there and how.
Bars being set,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And same question, but real personal to Les. So, and think of that as again the reflection on a career that, you know, talk about success. You know, playing, scoring for huge clubs, country, and actually being content right now, which a lot of people are not. You know, you've got that chilled vibe. What is your definition of success?
I mean, for me, coming from where I came from in terms of non-league football, and you get into the professional game, you know, I came in at 19. I came in really late compared to some of my peers, and then actually achieving and getting to play for, represent your country. Because once you get there, you get into the professional ranks, and then you start playing on a regular basis. The highest accolade you could probably get to is playing, representing your country, and you get there, and then I say, right, you don't want to do it once, you want to do it more than once, and, you know, get there on several occasions. For me, that you know, in terms of a career, yes, I wish I had won more. And, you know, I spent a lot of time at QPR when I probably could have moved on, and perhaps that stifled me from winning a few more trophies. But, you know, I'm pretty pleased with the way the career went.
Yeah, I have to say it was a pleasure always watching. Without getting myself into trouble again, when I watched you come out to play, and there was that feeling amongst the team as well. Everyone wanted to be there. It felt like you were going to give it all. You know, you are an all or nothing kind of person, right? You know, back to today, so I'll come in and I've got you fully present. Whereas there's back to that almost entertainment stroke sport, and so much money in the game. Sometimes I'm watching a game, whether it's national or a club, and you just think, are they really committed? Is there half an eye on? So because there's just so much distraction now. There's so many kind of deals going on outside of the game, right? It's just like, I never felt that with you. You're smiling away.
No, do you know why? Because you're saying it's kind of like turned into more entertainment. But we were called the entertainers.
Yes.
You know, because of the brand of football we played. Not because anyone weren't committed. We were just on the front foot the whole time. And, you know, if you scored one,
mega to watch.
Our motto was, you score one, we'll score two. If you score two, we'll score three. And inevitably, you knew. I think we became everybody's second favourite team because they knew whenever we played there was going to be goals.
Well, there's never a 0-0, was there?
Yeah, exactly.
It was like 7-6 or something with you with a hat-trick. There we go, golden days. What advice would you give to someone coming through now, looking at life in a sort of, you know, wanting to be a footballer and sort of you as a role model, looking back?
Enjoyment. It's the one thing, you know, when I was sporting director at QPR, one of the things we used to say to the parents, allow your kids to enjoy football. Because you'll only get to where you want to go if you're enjoying it. If you're going in there and you're thinking, I'm doing this because I want to be a professional footballer, you're going to put too much pressure on yourself and you're not going to enjoy the journey. And the best footballers I've seen whenever I've watched football, the best footballers in the world that I've ever watched and seen, whenever they play like they're playing in the park with their mates.
Free.
And just, you know, you watch Messi, you watch Ronaldo, you watch Henry, you watch Ronaldinho, my favourite player, the Brazilian number 9. You watch them play, and they play with a joy and a. It's almost like all the shackles come off, and they just enjoy what they're doing.
Flow state.
Exactly, and that's what I would say to any kid. Yeah, listen to your coaches, because they'll never give you advice that's going to harm you. They only want to see you improve. So I would say listen to your coaches, but enjoy the game. That's enjoy what you're doing.
You've played against an unbelievable array of players, world class. Who's the greatest player you've ever played against, in your opinion?
Ronaldinho. I was playing for Leicester at the time, and we played Barcelona in a pre-season friendly, and it was the year that he scored. He just scored the goal against Seaman the year before. You know, that free kick that went in the top corner. And I remember every time he touched the ball, the whole crowd would burn him. The whole stadium was burning him, apart from the little congregation of Barcelona fans. Everyone was burning him. And then the goalkeeper sort of like half volleyed the ball out, and it went into him, and he chested it. And the defender marking him came to try and get it. He flicked it over his head one way, flicked it over his head, and then volleyed it out to and everyone just stood up and started clapping. And then just after that, everyone cheered him every time he touched the ball. He was just sensational, and all he did, he just played with a smile on his face. You know,
it was a
pre-season friendly, but I just, you know, I've played with some great players. You know, Paul Gascoigne would be up there as one of the greatest players I've ever played with. David Ginola, JJ Okocha, as you know, a few of the greatest players. But when I think about them and how they played, just like that, just free.
I love it. It's taking me back to all sorts of images and visions. Leadership's a key part of you kind of leading from the front, and having great managers that you've worked alongside. What's probably your greatest experience of leadership during your playing career?
Wow, it's a good question. That I think important people have come around at different times in my career, and I've taken little bits from.
Yeah, it's a very personal question to you.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about who's the greatest leader, like something that just resonated or had an impact.
Probably Jerry Francis. You know, I spent a bit of time out in Turkey with a fella called Gordon Mill, who's really instrumental in starting my career off, because he put a lot of faith in me. He took me out of the reserves at QPR into this fantastic arena, which was Besiktas, and kind of put his faith and trust in me, and I felt I couldn't let him down. So he was really important. But then when I came back to QPR, Jerry Francis came in, and you know, I grew up in Notting Hill, West London. I grew up on the estate where the Grenfell fire was, and so I grew up on that estate. So it was, you know, I had a bit of a rough upbringing in terms of like I had to look after myself and blah 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 blah. And I always felt that, you know, I could look after myself. You know, I didn't really need anyone. I was cool. But Jerry came in and put an arm around me, and I didn't realise I needed that as a player and as a man, as a young man. I didn't feel like I felt like I could cope with whatever the world had to offer me. And then Jerry just put an arm around me, and it just kind of like released all the shackles. I was able to go and do what I needed to do.
I love that.
So he was important.
Again, there was a lot of probably bravado, and masking and shooting.
Yeah, 100%.
From your upbringing,
Yeah.
You know, you show a weakness, probably going to get your face punched in and what have you. And on the football pitch itself, you show a weakness.
Yeah.
You know,
and one word you used right at the beginning of this was ego, and I think we all have it every now and again. And you know, it's really funny when I went in as a sporting director, every morning I pulled up at the training ground. Before I got out of the car, I'd say to myself, please leave your ego in the car.
Oh, that hits home. So I've got a guy who you'd love, Steve Hewitt. He was the CEO. You know Steve?
Yeah.
He's like, leave your ego at the door. And he's invested in the business, the studio we're sitting in now. Great story of how him and Ben Francis came together, where Ben, young lad, thought he could do it all. You know, and eventually kind of put his hands up and said, oh my God, I can't do this. And Steve said, now I can work with you. Took it to unicorn billionaire status. And
that's it. Just try and leave your ego at it. You know, every day I go out of the car and I say, leave your ego in here, son. And go in.
You're an absolute pleasure to talk with. I could keep going for ages, but we run out of time. Have you enjoyed this?
I really have.
I've learned loads. And you're inspirational, Les.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
What's keeping you busy onwards now? Have you got something you really want to still make happen, or are you just working out things and chilling?
Yeah, just working out what the next step is. You know, whether it's back into football. And like I said, I've got so much, I say, knowledge and, you know, understanding the game and what I've done and things I've seen that I feel I could help a football club. But I don't know if football's the thing that I go into next. You know, I'm just weighing up my options and seeing
whatever you do. Good luck.
Thank you.
And football will benefit in any way if you come back into it in any way. But thank you for making time to talk to me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.